Hi, everyone. It's Scott Taylor with the Afterlife Files. Every once in a while, I'll get an interview that gives me great nuggets for events that happen during a near death experience. Kathleen Ball was one. Here's a couple things I'd like you to listen for. First off, she has an opportunity to see the past, the present, and the future as experienced by mankind. And at the same time, it's the result of time collapsing. And I think that description is really interesting. Second, she has the active involvement of angels in her life. And I have not heard of stories quite like this, except maybe on television. So that's fun to listen to. And third, and where she spends most of her time, is talking about the collective evolution of mankind. This is particularly interesting because she gives us insights into how we can participate in what she sees is this beautiful future for all of us. And here's the bio of Dr. Kathleen Ball. She is a researcher, traveler, explorer of ancient sites, and helps us to understand near death experiences. She had one in 1990. After that, she began a career as a professional artist and art professor that spanned 30 years. Here is a really fun interview with Dr. Kathleen Ball. Kathleen, it's just wonderful to have you here on the Afterlife Files. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Oh, you're very welcome, Scott. I've been looking forward to this all morning. Yeah.
So, here at the Afterlife Files, we specialize in near death and shared death experiences and what it means to be a multidimensional human being. And you have a really interesting story. So let's start out and tell us about, where you were in your life and how your NDE came about.
Okay. Well, the ND happened on March 11th of 1990, actually between the morning of March 10th and the morning of March 11th. In 1990, and it was after 33 years of a very, very challenging life, to put it mildly. um, I had basically given up on trying to figure out how to function on this planet. Everything that I had tried to do up until that point in my life had failed, and I had literally moved and lived in 65 different places in 33 years. So that kind of give you an idea of it was continual moving, continual, just searching, trying to find out where I fit in and what I was going to do. I had at that point in my life, I had been a silk screen printer, a bartender, a waitress. I had worked in offices, accounts payable, all sorts of stuff. Um, but I think, after my first husband was shot and murdered, which was just a few years prior to my near-death experience, it was about 3 years prior to that. And I had three young children that I was raising. I just knew I needed to make some kind of shift. So I moved up to the Amador County. I moved up to this little town called Fiddletown. And it had 102 people. And it just seemed like a wonderful, nurturing place to raise my children and just start a new life. And I ended up staying in Amador County for 35 years. It definitely stuck. It was a beautiful place to raise my kids. But anyway, I was still not successful in being able I just couldn't find my niche in life. And I was just, I was just distraught. I was very depressed. I had been for a very long time at the condition of our planet and what was going on with the corruption and everything that was happening in this world. So what I finally did was I decided that I was not going to be a decent mother for my children. I couldn't give them the life I wanted. And I asked a very close friend who didn't understand really what I was asking, or had any idea what my thought process was. But I asked her, I said, if anything was to ever happen to me, would you take my kids? And she said, absolutely. Of course, we've known each other since we were 5. But she had no idea. She had no idea what was on my mind. And so I was probably a good month and a half later. Um, well, interesting. I was working in a restaurant at the time, and I had a man come into the restaurant, ask me several things. But the main thing he asked me, which was really bizarre, he looked straight into my soul, what it felt like. And he said, what are you doing? And I rattled off a bunch of baloney. I was trying to go back to school. I was trying to do this. And he said, no, you know what I mean. And it just went into my soul, and I broke down crying. Anyway, he got up and walked out of the restaurant, never drank his coffee, prepaid for it, walked out the front door and disappeared into thin air. And
oh my.
into thin air. I know. It sounds really bizarre. And the other waitresses, we all witnessed it. We witnessed it. They were standing, by the register, and we looked out, and he literally opened up the door and walked out and disappeared. We went outside looking for him, and he was gone. He was just gone. So this was the second time I had something like this happen. The first time happened when I was 18 in a restaurant, same thing. And I call them my Sufi masters in my book. When I have, my book, I write about this. I've written about this. Anyway, I refer to them as my Sufi masters because I don't know anybody else, any other spiritual belief system where people can do that. They can literally dematerialize and, go somewhere else, interdimensional travel, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, so that happened just shortly before the near death, and it intensified my sense of depression, my sense of failure, at what was happening in my life. And so what I did is I sat up one night and I wrote out my last will and testament. I wrote out everything that I wanted, where my kids, where I wanted them to go and everything. And I asked God to take my life. And I laid down in my bed, and my heart stopped, and I stopped breathing. And I instantly felt out of my body. I felt like I was just propelled out of my body. And it was the most wonderful feeling. I felt unencumbered. I felt free. And I was surrounded by this amazing light. I didn't have the tunnel experience like a lot of people do, but I had this just amazing, just beautiful light that I was surrounded with. And I just felt permeated just completely, my whole being, with this just intense love that was, I just really wanted to stay there. And I thought it was in heaven at first. There was a lot of angelic beings, which I painted. I was an artist, still am, but I was a professional artist, and so I painted this as best I could. It's difficult to capture a multidimensional experience on a 2-dimensional flat surface with paint. It's just next to impossible. But I tried. I've tried. But anyway, so during this experience, I saw like a newsreel of past, present, and future. It didn't necessarily pertain to me specifically or personally. I just saw that it was like a newsreel kind of experience. And I got to see what I believe is the future of mankind, of our collective evolutionary future that is possible. It's a potential. I thought when I first came back from the experience that was set in stone, that was it. That was what was going to happen. But what happened with me is I became committed to doing whatever I could to bring that future about. And I felt for the first time in my life like I had a reason to be alive. And I had a choice. it was telepathically conveyed to me that I could stay there. I had freedom of choice. I could stay there, or I could return to my present life and participate in bringing this beautiful future, or a beautiful future, into reality. And that there were others on the planet that were also committed to this. And so I was not doing this alone. But anyway, and so I chose to come back. You know, that was my decision. I chose to come back. Also, they told me too that if I chose to stay there at that time, I would have to come back and live a very similar life that I had been living. And that was not a pleasant idea. Because, you know, the soul, they conveyed to me that my soul, these things aren't personal. And you realize this in a near death, that all these instances and all these things that happen to you in life, you know, no matter how devastating they may feel and seem to you, they're not personal. It's only to educate the soul. It's for the education of the soul and the, you know, the continued evolution um, and ascension process of the individual soul. So all these challenges that I had faced up until that point were all for a very specific reason to bring me to this place. And I believe that even my near death experience was destined. You know, at this point, I really honestly believe that that was all part of the plan. And at the time, it was interesting while I was there, this whole future and everything that I would be, people I would be meeting, all sorts of things were revealed to me. But when I came back, I forgot. I didn't remember any of that. And what has happened is that it's unraveled step by step by step. I get a feeling, and I don't know how to explain it, but it's just sort of an excitement preceding an instance, you know, a situation that's about to happen that I know is part of this unfolding of our future and of my destiny, my personal destiny. So, you know, that's kind of encapsulates, you know, what happened. It was still to this day. I remember it as clearly as it was yesterday. And it's still the most profound, life altering experience that I have ever had, ever. And I've had a lot of really, really wild experiences.
Wow. So, Kathleen, when you lay down to like give yourself up, uh, was that precipitated? I mean, was there drugs? Was there, or you
No, I
just
had
laid down and gave up?
no, I had been involved. You know, I had done different street drugs and smoked pot, you know, all that kind of stuff. Drank, you know, alcohol and stuff prior to the near death, but not. I was not under the influence of anything at that moment, and it was just simply a surrender. I really don't know any way to. I just surrendered to the universe and said, "Look, I'm done. Just take me. You know, I'm done. I can't be of any use. I cannot be of any use the way that I am. I'm something's wrong." You know, I really did feel like something was seriously wrong, like I was an alien from another planet or something, plopped here on Earth and with no instructions. I mean, that's literally how I felt. And I had felt this way ever since I was a child. You know, I always felt out of place. I was always the one in the library studying. You know, I read every single book in the library and, you know, certain fields and things. And I was always, you know, kind of
I've
just
often
out of
wondered
place.
why we come into this world without an instruction manual. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with
yeah.
you on that one.
I really thought it was a bad joke, you know, that somebody was playing, and I didn't have a clue at what it was all about. You know? So yeah, but what did happen after, and I think it's important to mention, is that immediately when I did come back into my body and I did finally get that first breath, which was I never wanted to live more than anything that moment, and I couldn't breathe, and my heart was not. I was still in my body. I felt locked in my body, and I was afraid that I was really dead, that something really happened. Anyway, when I caught that first breath, and I finally, was able to breathe and realize that I was back on the earth, I was back in my body, and that I was alive. Um, I have never touched alcohol, any kind of drugs. I quit smoking. Everything in my life completely changed in that moment. Everything. And I don't know how long I was in that state of the near death. I can't really, I can't really judge.
So when you left your physical body and you went up into this realm of love, you mentioned that you were surrounded by beings.
Mhm.
Uh, and, what did they look like? How did they interact with you? What was the conversation like?
They looked like swirling pastel colored lights. They were illuminated, but not lights like you think, like a lamp light or a lights, just illuminated color that was constantly swirling. Very beautiful. There was no facial features. There was no physical like we have here on Earth. There was nothing physical. And at one point, I saw in our future that the plants and the animals and everything looked similar to this. That we would move into a future time collectively where we would be more ethereal. We would not have the physicality bound by gravity, the carbon-based bodies that we have. I saw a future time, what I believe is our future, that we were. It was just beautiful. It was very similar to that dimensional experience that I had in the near death. Very similar to that. We just had a little more physicality, but not solid. We were not solid. So it was a very beautiful future, very harmonious, very cooperative. It was just it was beautiful to be able to witness that.
So those pastel beings, did they communicate with you?
Did they what?
Communicate with you?
Yes, yeah, they did. It was all telepathic, everything. I felt their thoughts. I felt them, in my essence of my spirit. Um, they conveyed thoughts to me. As I thought of something, they would show it to me. When I had regrets in my life, they would show me things that that I don't remember. When I came back, I don't remember all the particulars. And I often wondered why that is. Why didn't I get to come back with all that memory? Because I would have loved to have been able to, but I didn't. It was washed away, and I felt like for some reason that they wanted me to just focus on my life. And then when it was necessary for me to do something and I'll talk about that in a minute, but that, I get this excitement. I get this sort of excitement. And for some reason, it needed to happen that way. There was some reason why it needed to happen. And I don't know what that is. But this is for instance, very, very soon after my near death experience, probably 6 months into it, um, my son had just bought a bike on layaway. He just paid off his final payment. And he wanted to go show this other boy that had been his friend in Fiddletown. Well, that family had moved to another area called River Pines, which was not a very good area. But my son wanted to show this kid his bike because he promised that they would go bike riding together. And so I said, okay, so I'll take you down there. And let you see your friend. You can ride for about an hour. I'll visit with his mom and blah, blah, blah. So we get down there and I start getting this real bad feeling, just trepidation, just this really bad feeling. And we get down there and the little boy comes out of his house and he comes directly up to my car door, my truck door. And he says, "You need to help my mommy. Please come in. You need to help my mommy." Okay. So I'm getting this feeling. I've got this feeling and I'm radiating with this feeling. And I said, "I don't know what I can do, but I will try to help her." So I didn't know what I was walking into. And I walked into, she was a mess, just a mess. And she started crying and telling me that she wanted to, she and her husband had lived in Nevada. He had been a preacher. They had a small church. They got into some bad drugs and doing things that, that were wrong. And this is where they ended up. They were constantly moving because they were spending the rent money on drugs and alcohol. And this was happening again. The landlady had threatened to come over and bring somebody to beat up her husband, and all this stuff was going on. So I said, "What do you want me to do? What can I do to help you? I can't help you with that stuff, but I can maybe help you." And so she said, "Can you take me and my daughter, her youngest child, to your house so I can detox?" And I said, "Sure, we can do that." So I took her to my home. 3 days later, she was detoxed. She wanted to go back and tell her husband, talk to him. I was not for it. I wanted her to just stay separate. But anyway, I agreed finally. When we got there, he had dumped all the alcohol down their drain. He had dumped all their drugs in the toilet, flushed them, and apparently they had had a conversation before this happened, before I showed up. Anyway, they were reconciling. Things were looking like everything was going to be okay. So I get ready to leave, and here comes this landlady with two thugs. I mean, the one guy was about 6'5", huge. They have bats and poles, and they were coming down what it looked like to beat up her husband, demanding the rent. And I panicked. I just panicked. And I said, "Okay, I'm going to get you all in my truck," because I put everybody in the back of my truck. And she said, "No." Her husband went over to talk to these guys. And so she was staying there. I said, "I'm getting the children out of here." So I got the kids in my truck. I went in to start my truck, and my truck wouldn't start. And so I said, "Okay, please give me the words. Tell me what you want me to do." I mean, I'm very afraid at this point. I'm very, very full of fear. Anyway, what happens is it's almost in a daze. I got out of the truck. I walked up in between this man and these two thugs. And I turned around to them and I said, "Can you please put down your bats and poles and help me push my truck?" Because my truck wouldn't start, right? And they did. And they did. They helped me push my truck. My truck got started. The next thing I know, they're talking with this man who used to be a minister, and they're confessing all their sins, and they're crying and apologizing. And these men are hugging each other. And the woman comes up to me and she said, "Did you know that there's an angel behind you?" Yeah. So this is just one instance. And the landlady, it was standing in up on this hillside, waiting for these two men to beat up because she wanted this. And you could see her. I could see her. And she was agitated. And I felt like she was going to come back down and stir trouble again. But she looked up above me and took off running. So Scott, I was so stunned by this experience that I really didn't know what to make of it. But then since then, I've had numerous other experiences. There was a kid in San Francisco, this young man, probably 18, 19 years old on the street. I'm leaving, I'm in, the Academy of Art University at this point. I've left for my lunch and I'm walked by this kid and he's sitting in a corner of the restaurant. that was closed, but he was sitting in the corner and he just looked so forlorn. And I get this thing, the same conversation, the same message. Reach down and hug this young man. Okay. I reach down as he starts to rise and I hug him. And at that time, I'm noticing he's got bugs in his hair. And I'm thinking, what do I do? Anyway, I hug him and he starts crying and telling me all of this horrible life that he had lived in this terrible district in San Francisco. And he was just trying to get home to his mom in Richmond. And, and he was just, and he said, in the whole morning, everybody had just passed by him as if he was invisible. And he was getting ready to just kill himself because, he just felt like he was invisible and nobody cared, nobody helped. So at that point, the same voice, whatever, telepathic message says, give him all your money. So I didn't have much with me. I just brought enough for lunch. It was like $7 and something cents, right? So I pulled this money out and I hand it to this kid and he starts crying again. And he said, this is the exact amount I need for my BART ticket to go home to my mom. It was the exact amount. I was like, it's like I had nothing to do with that. I was simply a conduit, and something was handling that whole situation. I mean, what are the odds of me leaving with that exact amount? I had no idea, and not even having any idea I was going to see this kid. No idea. But anyway, things like that. Those are just two of many, many, many things that have happened since then. I believe that I'm living in multi dimensions at the same time. I'm accessible to the other dimensional realities, and that's how I get these messages to go places, to do things, meet with people. And it's been both a blessing and a curse, to be honest, because sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes it's really difficult. Most times I'm just happy to do it. I'm really happy to do it. But it's a hell of a way to live. And, in our current time frame now that we're living in nowadays, 30 years, 35, almost 35 years later, 34 actually years later, it's a little more acceptable to have had spiritual experiences and near-death experiences. But back in 1990, I was really looked at as an oddball,
I hear
and
you. Yeah.
I did not share very often, with very many people, hardly anybody. And I didn't even talk about my near-death. So.
And so when you say you've had a hell of a life, is that hell of a life like difficult, hell of a life like blessed?
Like challenging, like very challenging. I mean, I just recently wrote a book about all of that. It's the backstory of my discovery of a Knights Templar cave in Brazil that I discovered in 2015. But in a nutshell, this is what happened. I discovered the cave in 2015. At the time, I had a very serious liver disease. I was facing liver transplant, and it was inevitable. It was going to have to happen. I had cured 7 cancer tumors using ayahuasca in 2014, but the liver cancer came back. And I had it for a total of 4 years at that time. So this is 2015. I came home from Brazil after discovering the cave and a very, very weird experience with John of God in Brazil. Anyway, I came home. 9 days later, my home burned to the ground with everything I owned, all my curriculum, all my artwork, all my children's mementos, my heirlooms from my family, everything was gone. 3 minutes, the whole place was gone. 3,800 degrees. It even incinerated and actually vaporized my bronzes. That's how hot it was. There was no bronze flag. There was nothing. So that happened 6.5 weeks later after the fire. I had the liver transplant. And the anti-rejection medication from the liver transplant caused severe hearing damage, which now I have to wear a cochlear implant. But what that did was I could no longer teach. I was an art professor at Columbia College in Sonora. And I wasn't going to be able to teach because I had this hearing loss. So I had to take a disability retirement from the school, from the college, and I had to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life. What was I going to do? I had been doing research for many, many years. I was a researcher anyway. I traveled all over. I'd taken people on tours to Egypt and, India and South America and Europe, and I had done that. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just do that. I'll write a book. I'll start taking, do what I really, really, I love to do, and start lecturing and doing things like that, just on a broader scale. So it's taken me about let's see, what, 2006. I gave myself a solid year of recovery after the liver transplant. So it was in 2017 that I really got going. And so it's taken me, well, it's been about 7 years now, almost 7 years that happened. And I have recreated my life. I've written the book. I did the documentary. I'm now creating a mini series from that research, that line of research into the Templars. And I continue to cooperate with whatever this grand plan is, whenever that, whenever that arises. And it happens sometimes subtly. It's very subtle. It recently happened to me at the Conscious Life Expo in LA, and I was there for a conference last month, or beginning of this month actually. And I connected with some people that had some information for me, and it was, that was very subtle and very minor, but it's the ancient Jews, Hebrew, have a name for it. They call it a moed, which is a moment in time. That's all it's just called, a moment in time. But typically what it means is that two people come together for a specific purpose that has to do with the destiny of either both or one of the other people. And so these kind of things happen to me all the time.
So speaking of time, I wanted to go and talk a little bit more about how these beings showed you this progression of, what is, essentially, I think you said, from like creation through the current day, and then showing you possible futures. Talk a little bit more about that and what that was like.
Sure. Well, it was kind of confusing because it was like time collapsed. So, I'd see these things, but it was almost like it was all happening at the same time. That's very difficult concept to grasp here on in this three-dimensional reality. But I saw wars, and I saw a lot of devastation it was very devastating to me. I was a very sensitive person. So, and I had this deep love for mankind. I was born with that. I just had that from the time I was born. And I couldn't fathom why we were living like this when it's not necessary. It was not necessary to live this way. And that was, I continued to ask those questions while I was in this near-death experience. And they showed me how beautiful things could be, but that we had to continue to evolve. It was just like my own personal life, that collectively we all still had to go through these devastating lifetimes, eras, epics, whatever, in order to continue to evolve our souls, our collective soul. And so all these things were necessary for our evolutionary unfoldment. And so I kind of grasped it that way. I kind of understood a little better. And after the near death experience, I had some really powerful experiences that were examples of that. Um, I met a man that I had seen, that I had known very well in a past lifetime, and instantly I hated his guts. I mean, instantly. And I don't hate. I've never hated anyone. And I was with a close girlfriend, and I told her, I said, I can't stand to be around this man. I'm really angry. So we did a past life regression. She did Akashic record readings, and we did a past life regression. I had had a past life in Egypt with this man. He had taken some things from the temple and left with them. And I was really angry with him because what followed was destruction and the death of some of my family members and things. And I realized when she told we worked this out, I got to see all this. I ran into him two more times at the consciousness. What was it? It was back in 2006. Science and Consciousness Conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I ran into him two more times, and he would sit right across from me. And I'm not going to, he's a very famous person, so I'm not going to say mention his name, but he knew and I knew, and we both recognized that past life experience that we shared. And I realized at that moment that if things hadn't unfolded in history exactly the way they did, that other things would not have happened that were necessary for the collective unfolding of our consciousness and our moving forward in our evolutionary process. And I also realized in that moment that the things that were happening to me or that were happening to anyone on this life were not personal. They were not personal, and they were not meant to be taken personal. So that is kind of, when I saw these things in the near death, I still saw them and I still experienced them as negative or positive. It wasn't until I came back that I was presented with experiences that helped me to further understand that concept. And I did see wars and I did see destruction, a lot of it. And I think, that's what we're living today.
So, I get it that your life is kind of like a metaphor of also human life, all of us, and that this near death experience was an intervention that took you on a different path, and you've had several interventions since then that have coordinated your life in a particular way. On the big picture, is it the same thing? Does humanity, are we going to get a little help from the other side to move us where we need to go?
Yes, and again, I want to mention that I think that there's more people today that have had near-death experiences or reset intervention than ever before in history. And I don't think that's just because more people are talking about that. I think that it's just an actual fact. There are more people that are having near death. And I think that it is because that we are all doing something. We're open to this multidimensional experience after a near death. You can't help it. That's just who you are. Um, and so, because of that, we're used as conduits for things that need to happen on this planet in the physical realm, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I think I have talked to other people that have had near death experiences that understand that, because they too feel that they have been used willingly as a tool or a conduit for certain things to take place that have to happen in order for history to continue to unfold the way that it should, or the way that would be best for a advantageous collective history for all of mankind.
And Kathleen, when you get these nudges or these communications that you should turn right or left or talk to this person, whatever the thing is, how does that information come to you?
It's telepathically. I get this kind of tingling feeling and I get a sense of excitement. I feel a joy or, like an excitement. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a feeling I get, a physical feeling I get. And it always happens just prior to whatever these, when these things are about to unfold. Um, it's kind of like prep, a little like, hey, you're needed here or whatever, and I tell everybody, I said, people say, well, that's really, fabulous. And they want to put you on a pedestal. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You don't understand. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just a worker bee along with a whole lot of other worker bees. And we're just doing these things as a result of, near-death experience interventions, that we've had. And it's just the fact that I've agreed and opened up to this. Otherwise, other than that, I'm totally normal.
So, how do people who would like to be a worker bee, to participate in this future that sounds, very attractive, how do we all get more on the path? What's
Ask
been
for it.
revealed to you? I'm sorry. Say again.
Yeah, ask for it. That's what I did. I asked for it. I asked for them to take my life. I asked to come back and be participate in this whole thing. I firmly believe that if you want something with all your heart, that it will come to pass. And I mean all your heart and soul. If you really, really want that, it will happen. It'll start to unfold for you. And oftentimes it takes, putting yourself out, removing yourself from the busyness of the world. Take 2 week vacation, go to the Caribbean, you know, spend every day in meditation and prayer in the morning, not the whole entire day, but in your morning and your evening hours. Contemplate what that future would look like for you if you were to move into, doing something similar to what I'm doing. Um, Contemplate what is that future going to look like? How can you bring that future into reality for yourself? And I think these are all things that anybody can do. I call it a grail quest. Just because that's the way, that's how I interpret it, because I'm on the trail of the Templars specifically right now. That's what my research is. But that's what I call it. I call it a grail quest, and anybody at any time can do this. Oftentimes it's preceded by a crisis in your life, either a health crisis or a loss of a job, a divorce, a death in the family, something really devastating that brings you to a place of surrender. And when you're in that place of surrender, you're closer to the other dimensional realities than ever before in your life. You're closer to a place of surrender, and that's really the best way to put it, than you ever will be.
So you saw that we have been and are in this world of turmoil. And what's your guidance telling you about how to live through this particular phase that humanity's in, so so we don't go nutty too?
Yeah, it was conveyed to me that we were going to have a real rocky time in our future. And I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but I did know that we were going to have a lot of natural disasters and that we were going to have a lot of wars, that there was going to be extreme corruption. And it was conveyed to me that I just needed to stay focused on the outcome because that would eventually unfold, but it wasn't going to be pretty getting there. And and I wasn't real happy about that. But also, it was conveyed to me that all people on this planet, we have multiple lifetimes. So when we die, it's just the death of the physical body. That's all it is. You just take off the physical body, and you are who you are. You're never gonna. That's not gonna change. Your soul is your soul. So I have to look at it from the big picture, that even the wars and all that we're going through right now is that these beings are infinite and they are not destroyed. They are not, they're not dead in terms of the infinite reality, the truth, the pure truth of reality. Their bodies are dead and gone, yes, but they're not, and they will be back at a future time. It's like everybody agrees to their part. It's like a huge symphony, if you can picture a huge symphony, the whole planet. Everybody is doing their part, you know, everybody's doing their part. And there's all these synchronicities that happen. We show up at a certain place at a certain time, and somebody else is there and says, I've been waiting for you, whatever. But even just people that haven't had these experiences, they tell me, oh, I was just thinking about calling you, and I call them. And so these are small little synchronicities, but we are all connected, and we are all part of this symphony, and we are all playing our part, our musical instrument, whatever it is. We are all doing it regardless. And what's beautiful about the collective consciousness, the God consciousness, whatever you want to call it, uses all things, good and bad, both, to benefit the future of mankind. Nothing is wasted. Nothing. Not one single second is ever wasted in the whole collective future moving forward. It's never wasted. Always utilized. Even if you look at this, I always used to tell my students this: the Renaissance was birthed by the Middle Ages, which was the Dark Ages. If it hadn't been for the Dark Ages, we would have never birthed this beautiful Renaissance. We're about to do the same thing. We are birthing something new right now. If Anne Boleyn hadn't had her head cut off and been married to King Henry VIII, right, we would have never had the Enlightenment period. But do you see it's like a constant yin yang of circumstances that are always balancing themselves out. But certain things have to happen. Certain things are crucial for history to unfold the way that it needs to. So,
and so you've had a vision of this future, and you were counseled to stay focused on the outcome. What does that mean for you? How do you do that? What's kind of your methodology?
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of like creating artwork. When I begin, I get a thought, or I get something that inspires me. Right now, I'm doing abstract work. I'm bringing new forms into reality. It's birthing something. You're birthing something when you create art. And this experience is the same kind of thing. You're birthing, you are bringing something into reality that's never been here before. So it isn't going to look exactly like what you perceived it to look like. There's going to be, things that you, like for a sculpture, for instance, any kind of sculpture, a large sculpture that you build is dependent on the inner structure that you build inside of it. You can't do certain things because otherwise it'll tip over or it'll crumble. You have to have a strong armature. So I might sketch this person, because I was a figurative sculptor. I might sketch this person and think, oh, this is beautiful. I love these lines. That's why I want to create this. But I can't, because the armature restricts me, because it has to be balanced. It's the same thing with what I see. It's this beautiful potential future, but it's dependent on the understructure. It's dependent on the armature that we build collectively and how that is going to cause it to be a certain way. It'll the future will be dependent on what that armature looks like, and that armature we are all collectively building right now, all of us right now.
And we're bumping up against our time here. So, two things. One is how do people find out more about you, your work, and we'll touch on it another time about all this Templar stuff. That sounds really interesting. So,
Yeah.
where do they get a hold of you?
Well, they can get a hold of me on Facebook is the best. Kathleen Ann Ball on Facebook. They can also find me through the Templars in Brazil on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, both Kathleen Ball and the Templars in Brazil. I'm on TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn, and several different. I also have a website. It's www.templarsinbrazil.com. And my book is available on Amazon, and that is A Grail Quest, Discovery of a Mysterious Knights Templar Cave in Brazil. And that talks about all of the near-death experience. It talks about everything that took place leading up to the discovery of that cave, and also another very interesting experience that happened after that. I won't spoil for anybody, but I went into the Amazon jungle in 2021 and I had another miraculous healing. So that is in the book. So
Wonderful. And give us a last thought to send us home thinking and envisioning a future, a new future for us.
yes, anyone wanting to participate in this, just step out of your comfort zone, open up. Just surround yourself in trees if you can't do anything else. Just surround yourself in trees for an hour, do a meditation, ask to be connected to the collective consciousness. Do an Akashic record reading, do a past life regression, but do something that will take you out of your comfort zone, out of the rat race, the day in, day out rat race that you're living in. And that will open the door, maybe just a small crack, but that will open that door for you, for that connection. But if you never try, you're never going to connect. So,
Dr. Kathleen Ball, this has been a hoot, really a fun conversation. Thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who are watching, stick around because I've got a couple of comments about what Kathleen said that I think you're going to want to hear. So
okay.
thank you, Kathleen.
All right.
Really, really fun. And the rest of you, thank you for joining us at the Afterlife Files. I told you this would be an interesting interview. The first thing that really tweaked my attention was about manifesting. And she did a wonderful job of describing how, in a meditative state, in a contemplative state, you enter into a future and you describe it to yourself, picture it, feel it, taste it, use all the sensations that we have to create this capsule in which your future desire is located, and then send that out into the world and then let the guides see if they can make that happen. Second, I thought it was interesting when she was using our role here in the physical world and um, having it be a symphony metaphor and where we're all playing our part. And so, what's supposed to happen in this life and what's supposed to happen in that life, it's all this wonderful dance that we do to help each other out so that we can live um, and help evolve the whole human species. Interesting that she says that none of this experience is wasted. It all is used in helping to construct the future that we would most like to have. I found that to be really wonderful. And lastly, and I take this quite seriously when she talks about these roles that we play, don't take them personally. They are designed to help us evolve. And sometimes we have to be the hero, and sometimes we're the bum. The point is that we must live our most authentic self, our most authentic life in order for us to make that future happen that we all desire so much. Thank you for joining us at the Afterlife Files. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye now.